getting further into our food, our terrestrial food, we are going to look at how our meat is produced. And first, we're going to look at meat production, conventional meat production methods. And so, focusing in on feedlots and what that means for our environment.
Most of our meat comes from feedlots, and so feedlots are also called concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs. Basically, these are the factory farms. We have chickens in cages laying our eggs. We pack all the cows all into one place, and we pack all the pigs into one place, right? So there are huge warehouses or pens just to deliver food to animals and just produce them really, really fast and a lot of it. And so um, it's, you are going through a lot of feed. So a big problem here is that you're actually watering the crops. And so that's a huge footprint or ecological footprint. Whereas like the animal themselves may be penned in and not having the physical footprint themselves, their food is. And with that comes a lot of disease and, right, a lot of antibiotic use because of that disease. And so, there's a lot of water pollution. Um, there's a lot of waste going around, which again, right, introduces disease. Whereas you have a massive amount of food being produced, and in countries where we eat a lot of meat, like here in the U.S., it provides us with meat, right? That's great. I like steak, but they take livestock off land, like I said, and also reduces the impact that they would have on it. On the flip side, that land is being used to actually grow corn or grain for the cows. P.S. Cows don't actually eat that naturally. They eat grass. And so, in looking at what we're feeding them, if I look at how much I'm feeding them, the amount of feed that you have to feed a cow to produce 1 kilogram of beef is like almost 20 times more than just to drink like 1 kilogram of milk. Right? That's a lot of milk, but you know what I'm saying, right? Or almost 5 times as much as eating eggs. And so, right, the lower down on the food chain you eat, the less energy and the less input you're going to have to put into it. Not to mention, different animals will break down the feed that they're given differently depending on what they're given. Cows weren't meant to eat grain, and so that's why it takes so much to feed them to a point where we can actually get a product for them. So whatever we choose to eat is we are also choosing how we're using resources. Land and water are needed to raise food for livestock. And so, and then that livestock then needs land and water. And so producing eggs and chicken will require less space and water, and producing beef requires more. And so the lower on the food chain, again, I'm going to say it again, right? The lower on the food chain that you eat, the less impact you have, because if I'm eating an animal, that means that I also am eating what they have eaten, and what they have eaten needs to be grown.
I stole this essential knowledge point from section 515 from the APES curriculum. It's one essential knowledge point of more essential knowledge points in 515, but the other ones have to do with produce agriculture. So I just want to focus in on the livestock.
So free range grazing, look how happy they look. You know, these happy chickens, right? They're roaming outside for at least part of the day. It's more sustainable than these feedlots because they're walking around the pasture, their manure and urine are fertilizing the land. There's less disease because they're not highly packed in there, so which means I don't have to give them antibiotics as often. However, free range is very expensive. You need more land because you need the cows to graze something down, and then you need to be able to move them. So you can't have as many cows. So the amount that you're producing is a lot less.
Speaking of moving your cows, um, a more sustainable way of raising livestock is something called rotational grazing. Basically, you don't want your cows to overgraze your land like the tragedy of the Commons. Remember, that comes from Boston Commons, when all the farmers brought all their cows to graze down the grass and depleted that grass. Ultimately, you end up with desertification, where the soil is actually, being depleted of resources. That is not good. Because then, what did the cows eat after that? So, rotational grazing. First of all, I love this infographic here. And if you are interested in more, Ohio Valley Resource has some really great information, and there's a hyperlink at the bottom of the screen there. So download the PowerPoint if you'd like to know more. But basically, the land that's available is broken into sections. They're cordoned off in some way, so through fencing usually. And the cattle graze in one section, and after a certain amount of time, they get moved to the next, and then to the next, and then to the next. And this is really great because it kind of gives the grass a little bit of rest so it can recover. And this is in not grazing the grass down to nothing. That grass system is still in place, and so you get deeper root systems. You get a lot more nutrient-rich soil, reducing erosion, all of that kind of stuff. And so basically, you're just not overusing the land. And so there's lots to say on raising livestock. We'll talk a lot about raising livestock and pollution when we get to water pollution. So more to come. As you know, everything's connected. But that is it for now.